If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you've been feeling it. That strange, suffocating loneliness. The sudden distance from people you once trusted. The unsettling quiet where conversation used to flow. And you're wondering if something is terribly wrong with you. But what if I told you this isolation isn't a curse? What if the universe is actually protecting you? Jung discovered that before destiny arrives, the psyche orchestrates a psychological quarantine, a deliberate separation from the collective noise so profound that it feels like abandonment. Today, I'll show you why this terrifying isolation is actually the universe preparing you for something extraordinary. And once you understand why this is happening, your pain will transform into power. This truth will set you free. Jung spent decades studying a pattern that appeared in his most transformed patients. Before their breakthroughs, before their individuation, before they stepped into their true purpose, they all experienced the same thing. Complete social isolation. Not the kind they chose, but the kind that was chosen for them. Friends disappeared without explanation. Family members grew distant. Old social circles crumbled like ancient ruins. And these patients felt utterly alone in ways they had never experienced before. Jung realized this wasn't random suffering. This was the self, the deeper organizing intelligence of the psyche, removing distractions so the individual could hear its voice. You cannot listen to destiny when you're drowning in the collective chatter of society. The universe doesn't isolate you because you're broken. It isolates you because you're ready. Think about it. Every moment of your life, you've been surrounded by noise, other people's opinions, society's expectations, the constant pressure to conform, to fit in, to be acceptable. And beneath all that noise, there's been a voice. Your voice, the voice of your authentic self, trying to guide you toward your true purpose. But you couldn't hear it, not because it wasn't speaking, but because everyone else was speaking louder. Jung understood that the collective unconscious operates like a hypnotic spell. It keeps you asleep, compliant, average. It convinces you that your value comes from external validation, from social approval, from being like everyone else. And as long as you remain connected to that collective energy, you will never discover who you truly are. This is why the universe removes people from your life, not to punish you, but to wake you up. The collective functions through what Jung called participation mystique at its most primitive level. You don't just live alongside others in society, you become psychologically merged with them. Your thoughts aren't your own, they're echoes of collective programming. Your desires aren't authentic, they're implanted by social conditioning. Your fears aren't real, they're manufactured by the herd mentality that needs everyone to stay small, safe, and controllable. This is why breaking free feels so violent. You're not just leaving relationships, you're ripping yourself out of a psychological matrix that has defined your entire sense of reality. The pain you feel during isolation isn't just emotional, it's existential. You're experiencing the death of a false self that you believed was you. When isolation first hits, it feels like death. The people you relied on for emotional regulation suddenly vanish. The friends who made you feel seen stop calling. The relationships that gave your life meaning dissolve without ceremony. And you're left alone with something you've been avoiding your entire life. Yourself. Jung called this the withdrawal of projections. For years, you've been using other people as psychological crutches. You projected your sense of worth onto their approval. You projected your emotional stability onto their presence. You projected your identity onto their perception of you. And when they're removed, you crash. Because now you have to face the parts of yourself you've been outsourcing to others. This is why isolation hurts so much. You're not just losing people, you're losing the defense mechanisms that kept you from confronting your own shadow. But the shadow cannot be avoided forever. Jung understood that every quality you deny in yourself gets projected onto others. Every weakness you refuse to acknowledge becomes a criticism you level at the world. Every fear you suppress becomes an anxiety that controls your life. The isolation forces you to eat your own shadow, to consume and integrate all the parts of yourself you labeled as unacceptable. This process is excruciating. It means admitting that you're capable of the very behaviors you've condemned in others. It means acknowledging that you're not the hero of your own story, but often the obstacle. It means facing the truth that your suffering isn't primarily caused by external circumstances, but by your own unconscious patterns. Most people cannot bear this level of self-confrontation, so they run back to relationships, addictions, distractions, anything to avoid the mirror that isolation holds up to their face. But here's what most people don't understand about this process. The pain is temporary. The transformation is permanent. Jung studied individuals who went through what he called the incubation phase. Think of a seed buried in total darkness beneath the soil, or a caterpillar sealed inside the suffocating prison of a chrysalis. To an outside observer, it looks like death. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. But inside that darkness, something extraordinary is happening. Complete metamorphosis. The old form is dissolving so the new form can emerge. You are that seed, you are that caterpillar, and the isolation you're experiencing right now is the darkness required for your transformation. Nothing grows in constant light. Everything powerful is forged in the void. Modern neuroscience has actually validated what Jung intuitively understood. When you experience prolonged solitude, your brain undergoes measurable structural changes. The default mode network, the part of your brain responsible for self-reflection and future planning, becomes more active. Neural pathways associated with external validation begin to weaken. New connections form that allow for deeper introspection and autonomous decision-making. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to function independently of the collective. This is why isolation feels so disorienting at first. Your neural architecture is being demolished and rebuilt. The person you were is being erased at the cellular level, so the person you're meant to become can be encoded in your nervous system. This isn't just psychological transformation. This is biological evolution happening in real time. Jung himself experienced this during what he documented in his Red Book. After his break with Freud, Jung entered a period of profound psychological isolation. His colleagues abandoned him, his professional reputation suffered, and he was left alone to confront the terrifying contents of his own unconscious mind. For years, he descended into what felt like madness. He experienced visions, heard voices, encountered archetypal figures that challenged everything he thought he knew about reality. But Jung understood something crucial. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a breakthrough. He was being initiated into a deeper level of consciousness, and that initiation required complete separation from the collective mind. When Jung emerged from this isolation, he had discovered the framework of analytical psychology that would transform millions of lives. But he could only make that discovery alone. This is the paradox of destiny isolation. You feel abandoned by the world, but you're actually being promoted to a higher level of consciousness. Jung identified what he called participation mystique. It's the psychological state where you're so merged with the collective that you lose all individual identity. You think the thoughts everyone else thinks. You feel the emotions everyone else feels. You pursue the goals everyone else pursues, and you never question whether any of it actually belongs to you. The collective keeps you safe, comfortable, and completely asleep. Breaking free from that hypnotic spell requires more than willpower. It requires isolation. When the collective noise is removed, you finally have space to hear your own voice, and that voice will guide you toward a destiny the collective could never imagine. There are specific signs that reveal you're in destiny isolation rather than ordinary loneliness. Sign 1 is the sudden disconnection from old friends, not because of conflict or betrayal, but because you simply don't resonate anymore. Conversations that used to feel meaningful now feel empty. The things that used to excite you about these relationships now feel hollow. It's not that your friends changed. You changed. Your frequency shifted. And people who cannot match that new frequency naturally fall away. Sign 2 is that old hobbies and interests feel empty. Activities that used to bring you joy now feel like going through the motions. This isn't depression. This is your psyche rejecting anything that doesn't align with your emerging authentic self. Sign 3 is a feeling of waiting or suspension. You sense that something significant is coming, but you don't know what it is or when it will arrive. You feel like you're in a cosmic waiting room, and time has slowed to an agonizing crawl. Sign 4 is intense, vivid dreams. Your unconscious is waking up. It's trying to communicate with you through symbols, metaphors, and archetypal imagery. Pay attention to these dreams. They're showing you the path forward. Jung studied the Hermit archetype extensively. In tarot, the Hermit stands alone on a mountain peak, holding a lantern that illuminates the darkness. Most people see the Hermit's isolation as punishment or exile. But Jung understood something deeper. The Hermit's solitude is a promotion, not a punishment. The Hermit carries the light of wisdom precisely because he was willing to walk the dark path alone. Society fears the Hermit because he represents what most people cannot face: the possibility of finding meaning, purpose, and fulfillment without external validation. The Hermit doesn't need the collective's approval because he has found something more valuable: self-knowledge. And once you possess self-knowledge, you become psychologically invincible. This is why destiny requires isolation. You cannot become the Hermit while remaining trapped in the crowd. The terror of isolation reaches its peak when you realize that no one is coming to save you. No friend will appear with the perfect advice. No guru will hand you the answers. No relationship will fill the void. You are alone with your own consciousness, and that consciousness is demanding that you confront everything you've been avoiding: your shadow, your unlived potential, your denied gifts, your repressed authenticity. This is the moment when most people break. They run back to the collective, desperate for the comfort of belonging, even if it means betraying their own soul. But a very few, make a different choice. They accept the silence, they embrace the solitude, they stop fighting the isolation and start learning from it. And the moment that acceptance happens, everything changes. This acceptance isn't resignation. It's not giving up or surrendering to defeat. It's something far more powerful. It's the recognition that the isolation was never your enemy. It was your teacher. Every moment of loneliness was teaching you self-sufficiency. Every experience of abandonment was teaching you self-reliance. Every instance of being misunderstood was teaching you to trust your own perception over the collective's opinion. The universe wasn't torturing you. It was training you to stand alone, training you to think independently, training you to find validation from within rather than seeking it from without. And once that training is complete, you become unstoppable, because nothing the external world can take from you will ever diminish who you've become in the silence. You've discovered something that can never be taken away, the unshakable foundation of your own being. Because here's the secret Jung discovered about destiny isolation. The suffering stops the moment you accept it. When you stop seeing isolation as punishment and start seeing it as preparation, the entire experience transforms. The loneliness becomes solitude. The abandonment becomes sovereignty. The silence becomes clarity. You stop chasing the world, begging for acceptance, desperate for connection. And something extraordinary happens. The world starts chasing you. When you no longer need external validation, you become magnetic. When you no longer fear being alone, you become powerful. When you stop performing for the collective, you start attracting your true tribe. The people who are meant to walk with you on your actual path begin to appear, but they couldn't find you before because you were lost in the crowd. Now that you've found yourself, they can finally see you. Jung observed that destiny isolation is always temporary. It lifts exactly when the transformation is complete, not a moment sooner. You cannot rush this process. You cannot manipulate it. You cannot bypass it. The isolation remains until the old you has died and the new you has been born. And when you finally emerge from this psychological chrysalis, you return to the world transformed. You're no longer a needy participant in the collective drama. You're a conscious observer, a sovereign individual, someone who engages with the world from a place of wholeness rather than woundedness. You bring gifts the collective desperately needs but doesn't know how to ask for, because these gifts could only be forged in the fire of solitude. The transformation reveals itself in subtle but undeniable ways. You notice that you no longer feel compelled to explain yourself to people who haven't earned the right to understand you. You stop seeking permission from authorities who have no actual authority over your life. You cease performing for audiences that never truly saw you anyway. Your energy, once scattered across dozens of shallow connections, becomes concentrated and potent. You speak less, but with more impact. You commit to fewer things, but execute them with precision. You say no without guilt, and yes without reservation. This isn't coldness or disconnection. This is clarity. This is sovereignty. This is what Jung meant when he talked about the individuated person. Someone who has successfully separated from the collective trance and learned to trust their own inner guidance system above all external noise. Think about every great teacher, artist, philosopher, or leader who changed the world. They all walked through the valley of isolation. Jesus spent 40 days alone in the wilderness. Buddha sat alone under the Bodhi tree. Moses climbed the mountain by himself. Jung descended into his Red Book journey without a guide. Nietzsche wrote his greatest works in crushing loneliness. Every individual who transcended the collective limitations of their time had to separate from the collective first. Not because they were special, but because they were willing to endure what most people refused to face. The absolute terror of being alone with themselves. And in that aloneness, they discovered something the crowd can never find. The truth of who they actually are beneath all the social conditioning, all the expectations, all the masks. Your isolation isn't happening because you're unlovable. It's happening because you're becoming someone the old version of your life cannot contain. Your frequency is rising, your consciousness is expanding, your authentic self is demanding to be born. And birth is always painful. The caterpillar doesn't peacefully transition into a butterfly. It dissolves completely. Its entire structure liquefies inside the chrysalis before reforming into something that can fly. You are in that liquefaction stage right now. It feels like you're falling apart because you are falling apart. The person you thought you were is dying, and the person you're meant to become is not yet fully formed. This in-between state is terrifying, but it's also sacred, because this is where transformation actually happens. This is the crucible where your destiny is being forged into material reality. The universe isolates you because it's about to give you something that requires a completely different version of you to receive it. Your destiny isn't compatible with your current identity. The dreams you're being called toward cannot be achieved by the person you are today. They require you to become someone stronger, wiser, more integrated, more authentic. And the only way to forge that new identity is through the fire of solitude. When everything external is stripped away, what remains is what's real. Your isolation is revealing who you actually are beneath all the performance, and that authentic self is the foundation upon which your destiny will be built. So if you're watching this video from the depths of isolation, feeling forgotten by the world, wondering if anyone will ever understand you, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. You are not being abandoned. You are being refined. You are not losing your life. You are finding it. The silence you're experiencing right now is not empty. It's full of possibility. The loneliness you're enduring is not permanent. It's productive. The isolation that feels like death is actually the birth canal through which your true self is emerging. And when you finally step into the light on the other side of this darkness, you will understand why every moment of suffering was necessary. Because you won't just be different, you will be sovereign. You won't just be changed, you will be free. Jung spent his entire career trying to help people understand this process. He knew that the most painful experiences in life are often the most transformative, that the darkest nights produce the brightest dawns, that the deepest isolation births the strongest individuals. Your suffering has meaning. Your pain has purpose. Your isolation is not random, it's deliberate. And the force orchestrating it knows exactly what it's doing. Trust the process. Trust the silence. Trust the solitude. Trust that when the transformation is complete, the isolation will lift naturally. And you will return to the world not as a wounded victim seeking healing, but as a healed healer offering medicine. Not as a lost soul seeking direction, but as a guide showing others the way. Not as someone desperate for belonging, but as someone who belongs completely to themselves. And that self-belonging will be the foundation of everything extraordinary you're destined to create. Remember that the universe doesn't make mistakes. When it removes people from your life, it's making room. When it strips away your old identity, it's making space. When it isolates you from the collective, it's giving you the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to discover who you truly are. And once you know that, once you embody that, once you live from that authentic core, your life will never be the same. The isolation you're experiencing right now is the most important thing that's ever happened to you, because it's forging you into the person you were always meant to become. Someone who doesn't need the world's permission to be themselves. Someone who doesn't require external validation to know their worth. Someone who can stand alone if necessary, because they have finally learned to stand with themselves. This is why Jung called it individuation. You are becoming an individual, not just another face in the crowd, not just another voice repeating collective programming, but a sovereign being with your own thoughts, your own values, your own path. And that individuation cannot happen in community. It can only happen in isolation. So embrace this darkness. Welcome this silence. Surrender to this solitude, because on the other side of this isolation is everything you've been seeking. Not just peace, but power. Not just healing, but wholeness. Not just survival, but sovereignty. You are being prepared for your destiny, and your destiny is worth every moment of this painful preparation. The universe isolates you before your destiny arrives, because your destiny requires a version of you that can only be forged alone. In the alchemist's path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.